Welcome to Created Healthy. I'm Dawn Combs. It's a common idea that God gave us everything we need in nature, but do we believe it enough to walk that out in truth? Often the very same people who say this go looking for answers on how to use food and medicine from man-made sources. Everything man creates comes with a user's manual. Why would God be any different? I challenge you to join me in seeking revelation about our body, mind, soul, and spirit health by digging into His written word and in practicing pure science in the visible world of His creation. Last week, I talked a little bit about how plants can grow near us and that means something. So there's a connection to the plants that grow in abundance and tend to grow right where we are living. And my husband listened to it, and he had a comment, and that was that I hadn't gone far enough for him into why plants would be growing there of their own volition and what the purpose is of those weeds. And so I told him that I was saving it for today. I can't share everything in every video or they're going to get way too long and I'll run out of things to talk to you about. So today I want to talk a little bit about how the weeds get where they're most useful and why. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a concept in science called weed succession. We know a little bit about this in a gardening sense. If you've ever successively planted garden plants, you start out, you grow something early in the spring, and then you bring on another plant as that's dying down, you bring another one on. And we get the idea that this succession is growing plants one after another. When we talk about weeds, we're really talking about how they're growing from what's called the seed table. And so I want you to kind of imagine with me that inside our soil is basically a seed bank. And that seed bank holds on to various seeds that only sprout at the right time. So as we damage soil, as soil is tilled, the soil then has all of these different seeds that are available to sprout. We have been taught to think that that happens because weeds, as soon as the soil turns over, weeds are going to sprout, and there's no rhyme or reason. It's just a curse that we're going to have to fight with. But there is a design there. When the soil gets turned over, now we've created weakness and imbalance, because if you've studied soil science at all, or if you're a gardener, you know that we break up the mycorrhizal relationships every time we till. We're breaking up a lot of the access to balanced nutrition. You're breaking apart the soil itself, and all of that weakens the soil. It's something that in our garden we try not to till as much as possible because we don't want to weaken our soil. We're interested in building our soil, and leaving the soil unbroken is how we would go about doing that. So we have the soil, and undisturbed, it has seeds in it that are waiting to be used. It isn't just waiting to sprout, they're waiting to be used. Each one of those seeds will sprout into a weed. And here's where the purpose of weeds come. Each of those weeds is a specialist at fixing part of the soil's nutrition, meaning it has a purpose. So in a weed succession, this has been studied. It's something you can look up. It's knowledge. We have so much of this everywhere. It's knowledge that we've gained in science, but we don't apply it because it threatens our dogma of the germ theory that we've applied to the way we approach our soils. This idea that there is a bad guy and that there's something that we need to fight. When the soil is turned over and the soil is weakened and it needs healed, the first seeds that are going to sprout are laying down foundational nutrition. So the first thing that happens that you'll see, and we watched this in our prairie here on the pond for years because we disturbed the soil. Actually, it was subsoil. It was packed down by big equipment and then left, and nothing really would grow in it. So we watched this succession of how the earth is designed to heal itself. So the first things that come are the plants that are in the bean family, the Fabaceae family. And so you see the red clover, and some people call this purple clover, but it's Trifolium praetens. It is it's a plant that is capable of fixing nitrogen out of the air and into the soil. And this is foundational to begin to create a soil where other seeds are capable of sprouting, not just other weeds, but other more broadleaf plants. So we've watched this in our prairie. It started with plants that needed to fix nitrogen, and then we had plants that were fixing potassium. And yes, this is kind of the NPK that we use in um, when we bring in bags of fertilizer. We have some plants that fix phosphorus. Different things are these plants that we call weeds are coming in and returning health to the soil. And it's kind of like a card catalog. The soil is sifting through and sprouting these seeds that are going to heal the next level of nutrition. They don't all sprout at the same time because we have to build foundational. And this is, again, something we have to talk about as it relates to the body. We can't just throw all the nutrition at it when we're trying to fix a weakness. We've got to go foundational first, and we've got to build up from there. So anyway, I digress into something maybe we should talk about on another Sunday. This is a design that has been there from the beginning. And when I first started to observe it in our prairie, I left the weeds alone. I let them do their job. There are scads of books that you can get your hands on where people have observed and done the research, the actual chemical research on understanding what each of these plants. We have plants that are capable not just of fixing the nutrition, but we have, and I keep saying plants, but I'm going to use the word weeds because I really want you to get past this hatred that shouldn't be there. We have weeds that are capable of fixing lead contamination out of the soil in inner city places where we have damaged the soil and we think it's no longer usable. We have weeds that are capable of fixing radiation, pulling radiation out of soils. And that's another plant remediation is something I want to talk about on another Sunday. So I'll just give you that little tidbit and move on. But these weeds are doing a job. They are designed to do a job. And I watched it happen in our prairie and was fascinated with that. But I wasn't able to tie it back to a biblical truth. So I saw it as a truth in creation. I saw it as a design that God had intended to put around us. The soil is designed to heal. Anytime somebody tells you that the soil is just this empty container and we just have to keep bringing in, we need to buy in fertilizer and chemicals to dump on it to get it to act right. That's what we do in big conventional ag. We assume that the soil is this dead container. The soil is everything. I talked about our connection to the soil in our first episode of this podcast. The soil is a living entity that God created to sustain us, to keep our life renewing. It is a model of healing. So it absolutely has a design on how it will heal without our input. But I wasn't able to take that knowledge of what I saw in creation and apply it back to something that was in the Bible until I read Joel Salatin's Marvelous Pigness of Pigs, which I highly recommend. And he connected this dot for me when he talked about a passage in Genesis, and I'm just going to read it. It's Genesis 2, verse 4 through 5. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made earth and heaven. So this is telling you what happened on the day that God created the earth and the heaven. Now, no shrub of the field was yet in the earth, and no plant of the field had yet sprouted, for the Lord God had not sent rain upon the earth, and there was no man to cultivate the ground. So, what Joel pointed out here was that Genesis is telling us that there were trees. God created all of these trees, and in the garden there was sustenance from perennials, basically things that God had caused to grow, and there weren't all of these needs for the plants to have seed strategies to disperse because it was perfection. The trees lived, they grew, they bore fruit. It was perfect. There weren't weeds. So there weren't things that people have grown to fight. There weren't annuals, and so there weren't food crops. There weren't things that we till to bring up out of the ground and that we cultivate. None of that had happened because man wasn't around yet to cultivate. But this suggests that he created it all. He created wheat, he created barley, he created tomatoes. It was all there, but it was in the seed table. It was in the soil waiting to spring forth when tilling happened. And we see that when we break ground for a house. We see it when we break ground for a garden. When we break the soil, there is a design where all of these seeds that live in the seed table, they're there waiting to spring forth. And this is where all of the shrubs and plants of the fields were waiting. So some of what this points out is this fascinating idea that God created us. He purposely gave us free will. He didn't want something that would, he already had all of creation that would just serve to worship him. That's all nature can do, is worship God. It cannot pervert itself to go against God's design. It all works by design. But then he created man that could pervert his design, that could go against his will. And he knew, God understands, he knows, he knew that eventually man would do that. I think I've read enough so far that there are definitely how fast man would go against him and how stubbornly man would go against him in the face of all evidence. I think that catches God a little by surprise. But the fact that man was going to rebel was not a surprise. He already had it in the plan that even when man was kicked out of the garden, whenever he rebelled, that there was a design that man would still be cared for, that the earth would be able to heal from anything that man did, that God's creation was always embedded in this perfect design of creation and healing and returning, and that man, no matter what he did, no matter where he is on the planet, if he turned over the soil, would be provided for. Oh, so much to unpack there, and so much gratitude to think about there. But if we would just, we fight against this knowledge because we're taught that the weed is our enemy. And before we observe the majesty, before we sit back and see the awe of being provided for, of seeing how God's design replenishes us and heals everything in his creation, we're too busy listening to this lie and fighting it to sit back and see it in most cases. I have had the privilege of having the insight to watch that here on our farm, and it has been it has been life-changing to realize that Genesis 2, 4 through 5 states what I see in science. Weed succession is a thing, and it isn't here to, in the science, they know that weed succession is there, and it is part of the nutrient cycle, and it is part of healing, so to speak. But they don't go so far as to truly understand what that means and to apply it to biblical truth. So really cool thing. I hope that if you have a space on your property or in a flower bed, I highly encourage you to just let it be and watch what God does. It will humble you. We aren't needed to heal the earth. We can definitely cause damage, but ultimately God has a plan to heal his own creation, and it's bigger than us. Creation has always been bigger than us. We are meant to demonstrate our obedience by being good stewards, but it's not necessary. We aren't necessary to keep God's creation going because God's already got a plan. I highly recommend that you take the time to let an area do this. And instead of hating it and instead of worrying about what other people think about you, do it as a practice of watching how God provides, how God takes care of his creation, how God takes care of you. I think the blessings that you would reap from it, take it from me, the blessings that you would reap from it are immense. And I pray that you have the courage to let some weeds grow. Uh, until then, if you have a question or you think I haven't gone too far enough into something like my husband, please let me know. I would love to share a response on a Sunday or even throughout the week. I would love to share a response to what you're asking or seeing or observations that you've had. And so send those to me. Drop me a line on YouTube or drop me a line on Facebook or Instagram. I would love to hear from you. And until next time, I hope you're having a lovely day.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with a friend. And I'm always interested in hearing what God is laying on your heart. So drop me a rating or review or join the conversation on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube at Dawn Combs Really.